Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarwick. Sejohn?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Not much, just chilling, being the winner that I am. I'm a
Yeah,
winner, and look at me, you can see that I'm a winner.
that's what we are. We're all winners, right, Dev? You and me, equal winners. We are both winners.
Really? What did you win, Sejohn? I didn't
Uh,
realize that I was in the presence of a winner.
I we all win, right? Like in our own way.
Okay.
Why did you win? Why?
Well, I won the 92 Pro FM Cinemania party prize of Movies for Life, which is really, 48 movie tickets. But it's fun to call it Movies for Life.
Who
I
could ever possibly go to 48 movies in their entire life?
I know, right? It's a movie. It's such a weird thing. Things like that, like movies for a year, but then it comes down to, so we figured that that's one a year, one a week for the year, but
Yeah.
also we're 2 months into the year, so we're going to split the difference and give you 48 movie tickets. I mean, I kind of take away from the fact that I also, by qualifying, won 2 movie tickets, so it's like 50 movie tickets. So really, I
Still
only
not a
get
full
screwed
year.
over 2 weeks. But hey, what are you gonna do?
Hey, you won though.
I did win. It was an interesting experience because this weekend was my reemergence into the waking world, and that's something, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Almost two
like a
weeks, 2 years to the day when the big lockdowns started happening because of COVID-19. I decided to peek my head out, did not see my shadow, and inched even further out into the world.
like the warped little groundhog you are, yeah.
Yeah.
And no, in doing so, you walked out and were instantly handed a prize for
Right,
winning a
exactly.
radio contest.
I mean, in addition to that, I ate in a restaurant for the first time on Friday.
Mhm.
That was something. That was an experience. It was a great restaurant. I actually want to shout them out. Again, not a sponsor, but a big. They're called Blackstone. They're a coffee bar and herb store,
Nice.
which was very cool. I got a chicken Caesar salad wrap, which was one of the only non-vegan options on the menu. Not
Hmm.
the reason why I got it, just the fact that I've kind of been living on chicken Caesar salads at lunchtime and looking at everything else in the menu. I'm like, you know what sounds pretty good? That chicken Caesar salad that I usually have, but in a spinach wrap. So I went with that. And I also did a flight of lattes, oat milk lattes. And that was
Jeez,
a cool thing.
this is a weird.
It was an experience.
This is a weird turn for Devin. I
Yeah,
know. I appreciate
apparently
it.
I'm Crunchy Granola Decker now. It'll be a variant. It'll be available at the Emerald City Comic Con, the Crunchy Granola Devon figure. Get your pre-orders in now.
You sure it was real chicken and not like that
It was real chicken. It was one of
tiger
those. It was
tiger
very
meat, whatever they
strange.
call it?
Yeah, I don't know what they call the fake chicken. I know about impossible meat.
Well, no,
That's it.
there's like an Alan Smithy like kind of thing where like restaurants, if they want to imply that it's not real chicken, but they're not assigned to like any particular brand. I don't know if they're like making it themselves or what, but there's like there's it's like tiger wings or something, I think. So if you ever see tiger wings on a menu, what that is that's fake meat chicken wings.
Okay. Well, their menu was specifically. It was really cool because usually you go into a restaurant and you look at the menu and it'll be all the stuff that they have, and then in the lower corner there'll be like a little box and it'll be vegan offerings, usually our vegan offerings, because they're trying to make that connection via the written word right from the go with you. And that was what their menu was like, except everything else was the our vegan offerings, and that little box was our non-vegan offerings.
Yeah, I mean, there's restaurants out here in Salt Lake that are just full on just vegan centric.
Yeah.
I will not say that they're vegan strictly because they definitely do have meat options, but like you're saying, the meat options are the other options
Yeah.
on their menu,
Like,
and there's a few of them like that I like never really thought it would like throw me for that big of a loop. How many times I've gone out into a place and realized, oh wait, this thing I've been thinking about ordering for the last 10 minutes doesn't have any real meat in it.
yeah, it was strange, but also the fact that it had Parmesan cheese in it because it was a chicken. It was a Caesar salad, and that's part of what makes it a Caesar salad is the Italian cheese. You know, because it's named after Little Caesar. No,
Yeah,
I think
the
it's
greatest
named after
of all Italians.
Caesar the Emperor. Wouldn't that be crazy if Little Caesar's, the pizza shop you go to when you've given up, and again, I say that, I love Little Caesar's pizza. It's just like the one where like, all right, I don't want to wait. I want fucking food right now.
I, yeah, but you know what? Sometimes you just want a goddamn hot and ready. There's a
It's
there's a
true.
pizza chain out here called Papa Murphy's. Do you guys have Papa Murphy's back in the East
I have
Coast? Like
never heard of Papa
so
Murphy's, and I
Papa
know
Murphy's
pizza joints.
Papa Murphy's is and somebody out there is going to argue about this, and I don't care. You're wrong. It is the grossest concept in the world. They hand you a half-baked pizza and then expect you to take it home and cook it yourself. And so, but in addition to that, they also, the way they hand you this half-baked pizza is on a fucking paper plate wrapped in just Reynolds wrap.
That's
So
the grossest thing that I have ever
you
heard.
you pay them too much money for a pizza that's not even finished yet to be handed to you, not even in a box of any kind or any sealable container. And then you hope you get it home and it doesn't flop off the paper plate because, again, not baked. And then you put it in your oven for 30 minutes. So you still have to wait 30 minutes even after you get home to eat the damn thing.
It's not delivery. It's Papa Murphy's.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna be
that's
leaving.
so right. So that's what's out here. And sometimes you say, "Hey, I think I just want to go pick up just a pizza from somewhere," and somebody goes, "Oh yeah, we should do Papa Murphy's. That way we can eat it fresh." Is like the hook, and it's like, no, I think I just want a $5 hot and ready actually.
Yeah,
So like Little Caesars, you are my saving grace in this mad time.
But wouldn't it be incredible if Little Caesars was the place that was like, "Hey, it's a Caesar salad. It's
Oh
a
yeah.
salad, but we put cheese on it, and it's
I mean,
hot."
if you don't think for one second that at some point in their career, in their existence as a company, they did not lean into the Caesar salad from Little Caesars, they must have, right? It's just at some point when you say that they're the restaurant you go to and you gave up, that's not what it is. They're the restaurant that they themselves gave up. At some point, they stopped deciding
No,
to be a restaurant.
I reject that proposal.
They were like,
Reject
no,
that proposal.
We're not going to be a sit down like buffet pizza place like we used to be. Instead, every place is just going to be a counter and then just a whole bunch of hot and readies in a thing next to it, next to the person selling them.
Little
So,
Caesar has
they're
innovated.
one step away from they're one step away from an automated like you remember those old like Looney Tunes cartoons, the House of the Future, where they would have like pie behind glass and you'd have to put like 25 cents in to get a slice of pie.
An automat. Those are
Yeah.
real things. Automats were real things.
Right. Well, so that's what Little Caesars has basically become. Is they've become the automat of pizza.
Well, yeah, you know, you can go to Little Caesars and they actually have the hot and ready lockers where you've ordered a pizza you've paid for and they gave you like a 3-digit code and you put it in and like, here's your pizza.
And nobody fucked with it because it's your special code.
Yep. Little Caesars is the pizza place for introverts. It's the place for like, I want pizza, but I don't want to deal with the Domino's or anything like that. It is. And here's the thing. You say that they've given up. They've not, because Little Caesars is constantly innovating. Their calzone, their half calzone, half pizza thing that also turned into Batman.
Calzone? Yeah, the Batman calzone.
No, but it was just a calzone before it was a Batman. Then a second step of innovation is the fact that they shaped it like Batman. They're out there trying. And I want to give like real credit to Little Caesars because for a long time they were just the pizza place in Kmart of all things. Like Kmart's difference when it came to in-store offerings for food was we have a pizza place.
Yeah, I'll be honest. There were times when I was a little kid, and my parents would be like, you went to the dentist today, so we're gonna get you fast food. That's like a prize, right? What do you want? And Little Caesars was no joke. Like, was very often in the rotation of like, let's go to Kmart and get Little Caesars today. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be a Little Caesars next to the Blockbuster I worked in high school. And that Little Caesars, it had closed before I worked at the Blockbuster, thank God. But that Little Caesars, every Monday, you could get 5 pizzas with one topping for $20.
Yeah, that just would have been a cycle of cash in, cash out. You would have been going into the Little Caesars and spending your paycheck from the Blockbuster.
Right. That's just why I would have to get the second job at Radio Shack. Because it just happened with Spike's Junkyard Dogs. Yeah, look at that, local references. But yeah, no, Little Caesar. So I had a chicken Caesar salad wrap that was wonderful, and then I had this flight of oat milk lattes, and that's like one latte, right? Is what you're getting essentially because it's broken out.
Yeah.
But I get to try all the flavors. So I had a vanilla maple that kind of tasted like nothing, unfortunately. Like, it wasn't vanilla-y enough, it wasn't maple-y enough, so it just sort of tasted like coffee. I tried a pumpkin spice, which I really respect that I can get pumpkin spice anytime at this place. Like, I respect that. And that was delicious. I had a tuxedo, which I can only imagine is mocha and vanilla together. I don't have any proof of that. But what else would a tuxedo latte be? Do you know?
Tuxedo. So I don't know if it's the same thing everywhere. I'm not going to pretend to know a bunch about fucking coffee houses, right? Like I'm going to draw that line right here, right now. But there's a place out here that does a tuxedo where what it is it's a real dark. I don't know if it's a dark roast or a really strong roast, which are actually two different things, I guess. That's the idea is that it leans. One part of it is that it leans real heavy into like a really like dark, thick roast of a coffee, and then with the milk, it just makes it a tuxedo. So it's not really anything special other than that it's basically like from what I can tell the red eye of like lattes
Well, I
out
would
here.
love that. That sounded. That's not what it
Yeah.
tasted like. So
But
I don't know. But that sounds wonderful. If I'm ever out there, I'm getting me a tuxedo latte.
yeah,
That
yeah.
sounds. Ooh, I love a strong cup of coffee because if I can just do one coffee and be done for the day, it's wonderful. I
Yep.
I love that the Starbucks app I can choose how many shots of coffee I want, which is weird. Like Starbucks just in general is a weird concept in terms of we brew espresso and then we put that in a bigger cup and call it coffee. Oh,
I
okay.
yeah, well what's weird out here is you go into these places because there are a bunch of these kinds of places out here, especially when you get up into the Park City area up in the mountains where everybody are skiing. There's all a bunch of little indie coffee houses,
Mhm.
and you go in and you order just an espresso. You don't want a latte. They feel the need to like explain to you like that doesn't have the milk in it, right? And it's like yeah, that's why I want it. And then they're like you realize it's not that big, right? Yeah, no, I know, I get it, I understand. I don't, but as somebody whose bodily system does not process dairy extremely well, I don't always want milk, guys. Thanks, it's okay, I get it. And then they're like, well, we can make it with soy. No, I don't need it. I just want the goddamn caffeine in it.
Yeah, that's like when I visited Will. God, now that's like 8 years ago when I was
Mhm,
in London, and
mhm.
every meal, Will's addicted to coffee, right? I'll shout him out on that. Will is the biggest coffee
Call him out
addict
on
of
that.
this group. It's a shout
Yeah.
and a call.
Well, not only is he a big coffee addict, but he's a goddamn snob about it.
He
No, I'm
is a
kidding.
snob. That is very true. It is not just the fact that this guy loves coffee. It is very much, but we're not going to Dunkin' Donuts, right? And then we brought him
What's
to that.
wrong with Dunkin' Donuts, Will?
And then we brought him to that Tim Hortons, and he's like, "No, this is a cup of
Oh
coffee."
God.
And I'm like, "It's just the Timbits. They're full of, psycho
Cocaine.
drugs
Yeah, yeah.
that make you think everything tastes better." But yeah, so we would get coffee after every meal, and there it is literally just an espresso, and it's just like this is perfect. Like this is enough coffee to give me energy to
Yeah.
keep moving after the meal we just ate.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the other thing is you mentioned that like you got a flight of lattes, so I imagine that means that they were not very big, right? Like they were
Yeah, so
like
it was like
sampler sizes, which
yeah,
means you basically like you were like it's the equivalent of one latte, and in America, yeah, sure, but actually what you probably got was what would be considered a normal serving size, just three times
I
over.
got it 4 times over because the fourth one, like those are the three that caught my eye flavor wise, and I'm like surprised me with the last one. They're like really, and I'm like yeah, I don't put whatever you want in there.
See, I don't know. Like, I got a friend that does that. That does the whole surprise me thing sometimes when we like go out to bars and stuff. And I'm just like, if I was a waiter or a bartender, I just don't know how often I'd care. Like, if somebody's like surprise me, I would just be like, all right, here's like some mac and cheese in a cup. There you go. Like,
So
$20, please. Does that
that's
surprise
different.
you?
Saying to a waiter "surprise me" is kind of a "fuck you" move. Saying "surprise me" to a coffee shop where it's just a flavor shot,
Mm,
really, it's like if you have something that's old that you're trying to get rid of. If you have something that's abundance, I understand that that's what I'm going to get.
yeah.
Like,
I guess maybe that's what it is. Is saying surprise me to a friend when you go over to their house and they're like, hey, we want to make a drink, but I don't know what I want. That's okay. Surprise me. That's fine. I know you.
yeah,
I can kind of base my decisions off of what you like, what I have, all blah blah blah. Saying that to a complete stranger seems really weird because when you're saying surprise me, we don't really have like this like written agreement in American society that like it's okay if I don't like it. Like that is not necessarily implied in the conversation, especially if you're working wait staff in any context. Because let's face it, people that go out to restaurants, especially over the last 3 years, the people that have been in restaurants have been just horrible people.
Yeah, no, that you're not wrong about that.
So you surprise me, and the first thing I think is, if I was in that situation, I think, oh shit, I'm gonna piss this guy off.
No, well, here's the thing. The staff was great. I had gotten there before the other people in my group and saved a table because I was also meeting people for the first time as well.
Mm.
I sat and saved the table, and she's like, "You want to order?" I'm like, "I'm going to wait for them." And one of the reasons why I want to wait for them is I understand that I'm going to drink my 4 little coffees faster than everybody else. I just know how I work and act. So, like, I don't want to order my stuff and then they come in and order and then I'm just sitting there with my thumb in my ass. Like, right. I'm going to wait for them. So then they come in and they go order. And then once they order, I go up and I place the order. And she's like, "You were here early. Like, we were talking." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. But here's the secret. I'm going to finish my coffee before them." I know that. I know me. So, like, by letting them have it now, we'll probably all be finished around the same time.
Turn that shit on your friends. Be like, they're monsters. They are the slowest eating.
Well, you know what? Honestly, I probably should have, but I think the way that I did it, first of all, I got a lot of clout with the girl behind the counter because a woman had come in and didn't know where the line was. So then, but she had called in her order. It was like really strange because they didn't have like a call in place. They had like one single line.
Yeah.
So she's like, "Oh, you didn't get in line. Like, I can make your stuff for you, but you should have gotten in line when you got here." And then I'm like, "You can go ahead of me. I don't really care." Right. And she's like, "Oh, that's so kind of you." So then that, like, the girl behind the counter, like, was already like, we were already kind of friendly from that thing. Like, me understanding that this woman has been waiting longer than me.
Yeah. God forbid you showed that you were a human being. Because as I mentioned earlier, anybody going out to a restaurant nowadays, odds are they're just a terrible human being. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so then when I get up there, she's like, I still don't know why you didn't order. I'm like, honestly, I don't mind. It was nice to get a feel for the place and like really figure out. And now I know how everything works. This is going to be the easiest order you've taken today. So then we laugh. We have that little shorthand and I say that. And I'm like, and honestly, for the last one, any of the flavors, because it's a flight. It's not like one of those crazy flights where it's like 20 different beers on tap. You have 8 different flavors. These 3 are eliminated. I will be okay with any of the ones you have left. And they went with caramel. And I'm like, that's perfect. And you know what they probably have an abundance of?
Yeah.
Caramel.
Yeah.
And then they also snuck in another little surprise too. Like, they're like, "Oh, for waiting so long," they do CBD stuff. They're like, "We threw a shot of CBD into one of these for you. Do you want to know which one?" And I'm like, "No, that you're surprising me now." So, like, it was a really nice, like, it's a place I would go to again. It was a fun experience. And the wrap I had was great. But then, did you know that bakeries and stuff are making their own Pop-Tarts now?
Yes, the idea of the pastry that is possibly able to fit in your toaster has been a thing for a while now, outside of the Pop-Tart. Yeah.
No, but they call them Pop-Tarts. They call them vegan Pop-Tarts. So I got a strawberry rhubarb and brown sugar cinnamon. The brown sugar cinnamon was better. I think because, like, it was just frosted better. The strawberry one had a little less frosting on it. Plus, I was a little surprised that it was strawberry rhubarb, but it was still delicious. Mm. So, like, it was excellent. It was an excellent, like, emergence back into the world. And then the next day, I go to this Cinemania party. Now, here's the first thing. It's supposed to start 1 o'clock, and I have to register by 1:30, but I'm coming from a meeting. Like, that Saturday, I had a meeting to go to. That meeting was with the Dark Knight, Batman, Bruce Wayne. And I ended up actually not doing that because when I got there, it was full. It was a rainy day. Turns out that the Showcase Cinema, and this is crazy, in the wake of like AMC being like, we're going to subtly raise the prices of all of our movies that people care about. What Showcase Cinema is doing is a new thing. They've adopted the first showing of the day is $5 thing that you sometimes see other cinemas do.
Yeah.
So first showing of the day of Batman, which I had a free ticket to. I had gotten a free ticket because they're like, "You haven't been here in a while." And I'm like, "All right, cool. I'll go see Batman for free. Thank you." In X Plus, so with the Dolby Atmos and the laser projection, it's only $5. So it was full. It was like the fullest I've seen the theater. And as much as I'm like kind of ready to dip a toe into going back out to restaurants and like going to the mall, and because the mall people are constant action, it's not just like sitting in a room with other people for 3 hours,
right?
And seeing, like, when I check my seat, that both of the seats next to me are taken. So like I'm going to be arm to arm with strangers. I'm not there yet, right?
No,
And
I mean, and
everybody's going
also
to have their
like
own level.
walking into a mall, you have the ability at any time to then exit that mall.
Yes, and I had a
Whereas, like,
mask on the whole time too. Like I would have masked up in the movie as well, but it's just one of those things where like this isn't costing me any money if I don't do this. But yeah. So I go to the Cinemania party, and I'm running a little bit late because it was raining. Like, I came home and I did the other thing that we're going to talk about this week. Like, I have two big things to talk about. One is my reemergence, and then the other thing is, well, the other thing, and I'm not hyped up about it, is what I'm going to say, but I need to purge it from my system to be able to move forward. So I go there and I start. It's a game that I played. It's Tunic. It's the game Tunic, and we'll go from there. So I still like kept to my schedule for Batman, but then like I'm coming from Coventry instead of Warwick, so it's going to be a little longer. So I call them up and I say, look, I told you I had this meeting that I was coming from. I just want you to know I'm not going to be there for 1:30. And they're like, that's all right, as long as you're here before the drawing at 2. Like if you can get here by 1:50, you'll be fine. So then I do. I get there at 1:43. I sign up for the drawing because I had already registered for knowing a quote from Ghostbusters, an actually obscure quote from Ghostbusters. So I'm a little nervous that Ted Mosby might fall in love with me.
No, God.
Right? That's been keeping me up at nights.
No, he only really likes the most obvious lines in that movie,
right.
apparently, from what we could tell.
Can quote obscure lines from Ghostbusters. So, like, Ray Stan's going on the list of what is wrong with the Ecto-1. That's not going to get him there. But, Ray, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes? The Drake meme, but with Ted Mosby. Oh.
Memes in real life.
Memes in real life. So then what it was 5 people at the mall that day also got added into the drawing. So they started by picking those 5 people from the mall. And then they did a reverse lottery, which I don't know if you would call it a reverse lottery. It was kind of a last man standing sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where all of our entry cards got put into cups, and then the presenter picked the first cup, and then whoever name in that was eliminated and got to pick the next cup. So it was completely random. There was no chance of collusion or anything like that. It was just, if my cup is going to be the cup that's picked. And it wasn't. It was the cup that nobody wanted to touch.
There's something about that cup. I don't want to touch
that cup.
Yeah.
It's giving me vibes.
Yes, you won.
So I won tickets to a movie theater that last time I talked about wasn't great because there was a huge sightline issue.
Yeah.
But you know,
now you've got all of these tickets to experiment and test
and find the perfect place to sit so that you
go.
can see the screen and be comfortable. It should be fun. It should be a fun little experiment. And also, it's nice that it's not like a card that they're gonna punch or some sort of thing. They essentially just gave it to me in gift cards to the cinema.
Yeah.
For each ticket. So, you know, it's what you gotta do. But it was an exciting thing to do that. And then the finale of this whole story is this morning, I went out and I got a COVID test. And I've already got the rapid result back that I am negative, which is nice to hear, right? And that's not only because I was out into the world again for the last 2 days, but also my business is going mask-free today, Monday, when you're listening to this. So I just felt it would be like the responsible thing to do to make sure that I'm clean.
Yeah, one now is good, but remember this thing has like a huge gestation period.
Oh yeah, no, I understand that. So it's
but no, having a negative one going into that kind of environment is a really good start.
And I'm still going to mask up. It's not one of these things like MIT, right? Let's throw the Massachusetts Institute of Technology under the bus and their whole thing about no, you don't wear masks. We don't want you wearing masks. If it's not necessary, don't wear masks. Don't tell people that they have to wear a mask for any sort of gathering. On the institute level, we have decided that all masks are done.
But what happens if somebody doesn't feel well? Are they allowed to wear a mask?
Like you're allowed to wear a mask, but it's like the real thing that brought it up. But the reason why, like, I would call out MIT for the language that they used is you can't mandate for like small groups. And it was a research group where one of the members is currently going through chemotherapy as treatment for cancer.
Oh,
so
geez.
they're like, so we've had mask mandates since the beginning of the pandemic, and for her safety, we'd like to just keep it going. That like while you come to these research meetings, just put a mask on. And MIT lost their shit about that.
About an immunocompromised student wanting to be protected in some way? Well,
Yeah.
that looks real good,
Yeah,
doesn't it,
that
MIT?
yeah. And the chancellor's like correspondence totally went out and is visible, and I don't know if they're going to backpedal or something like that, but the fact that like it is against our code and you can be punished if you mandate masks for any sort of gathering.
But like, there's all sorts of stuff that mandates uniforms of some kind. Like, what happens if you're on like a like for instance, all I can think of is the intramural Quidditch teams that are all over the place, and how a
Yeah.
lot of them have like, not exactly full on costume expectations like cosplay style, but there is like a uniform expectation.
You have to
Like,
wear the colors of your house is usually one of those. Yeah.
right, and this is just a really low level example, right? But like on top of that, there's all sorts of things where this comes up. Why can they not just say that this is just a
Well, like imagine if you're like working in a scientific lab, right? Like they don't specify what type of research it is, right? But
Mhm.
right now there is something that could definitely contaminate these results. Requiring masks for entering this lab space is required. They can't even do that. Like it
That's
feels like
weird.
a real step in the weirdest direction.
No,
And then
see
the
that's
last
even weirder, right? Because like then on top of that, it's not even just COVID; it's breathing. Like
yeah.
like you need to put a mask on because like your literal breath can contaminate the results of
Yeah.
this
No, but
experiment.
apparently they can't do that. It's the weirdest letter, and it's out there if you want to search for it and read it. And it's just something that I'm thinking of as mask mandates are lifting at different places. And the fact that like, no, they're still required. Like you don't need to wear a mask when you enter the buildings where I
Yeah.
work. But if you are in a small group base, that's like it's encouraged that you still wear masks. Like so
I
it's
mean, like,
nice.
this is just one of we've talked about this before, so we
Yeah.
don't have to dwell on it. But the idea, like, being like going forward, we should all just consider the idea of putting a mask on whenever we're feeling a little rough or going in some place that we feel sketchy about. Like, you're allowed to do that. We've always been allowed to do that. We just, as a culture, just never really adopted that practice. But that is something that other countries have always done. So, like, if you've got a sore throat in the morning and you've got to like ride the subway, do everybody a favor, just put a mask on. And that's like, and that should just be common
That
courtesy.
should be common
Like,
courtesy going forward. The
right.
weird thing is how we politicize the masks in
Well,
America.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the biggest problem because they shouldn't have ever been politicized. It should have just been all right at this point. Now we have a reason why the common courtesy of masking when you don't feel great should happen. And that's the other thing is that the science and the way that they've presented them is so strange in terms of like wear a mask to protect yourself. They never really talk about to protect others.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, it depends. Yeah, like the messaging for sure, because like there are certain groups where they've tried to make it their point to make that their messaging, but like the idea that like some of the highest level people that are making these kinds of conversations happen are not looking at it that way is a little
yeah,
telling,
it's been a little
shall we
strange,
say?
and there's no real reason to dwell on it. It's just one of those situations where they're starting to lift, and I'm really appreciative of the higher ups in administration where I work being like, but still wear a mask if you want to.
Yeah.
While at the same time, MIT is saying you cannot require people to wear masks. You cannot request anybody put on a mask. Please respect people's wishes when it comes to masks. And it's like, you know that you're just not doing that while you're
Yeah, that last
denying
part,
people.
right.
Yeah, like it was a weird sign off line from the letter. It's out there and you should read it, but it's something that's been on my mind as you think about, like, you're right, there's a gestation period of it, and I mean, even Fauci himself said, like, things are returning back to normal, but, like, don't be surprised if we request masks again.
Yeah.
Like, because things aren't great worldwide. We're seeing variants that are attacking other countries. I don't want to talk about COVID anymore after the 30-minute mark on this one, but it was a big part of what I did this week.
Yeah.
Was
No, I
going
mean,
back
you
out
never know.
into the world and trying to live somewhat normally like I did pre-pando.
Yeah, just news from the from the salt flats. We like things have been a lot better out here for a little bit longer. Part of that is because the biggest city that we've got nearby is Salt Lake, and while it is a pretty big thriving city, it's nothing compared to having like New York, Boston, and all that like right nearby, right?
Where the cream filling in the New York Boston Oreo.
Yeah, and like being stuck between the two of them. But that idea that Yeah, going out to places and doing things, and anybody that's been listening to the show long enough knows that I've been pushing myself to do this sort of stuff for a while now, and you know things are still looking pretty good. So with that, like we've been out a few different places. We went to a trivia night the other night. That was really cool. Got to go see a new play recently. The play was really interesting because it's at one of the biggest theaters in Salt Lake. It's called the Eccles for anybody that knows the area. But they have. They definitely still have restriction policies in place. Like some shows are like straight up requiring like vaccination cards and masks and all that sort of stuff. And so like going to restaurants where obviously they're not going to require you to wear a mask the whole time, right?
Because you're
like,
eating.
You're right, exactly. So like going from places like that who have been a little bit more lax to going to there's a lot more variation, so you kind of have to be prepared for more out here. But at the same time, more often than not, you're not going to really be forced into anything, you know, too restrictive. But it's like really weird because like some places you'll walk in and they'll be like, you don't have to wear that mask if you don't want to. And you know, sometimes you'll give them a hand wave and be like, thanks, but I think I'm going to keep it on. Or, you know, straight up the other day, I went into an office and somebody was like, oh yeah, we don't have a mask policy, but I'll wear one if you want, because I had one on. And I was like, no, I'd rather take this thing off, because at the end of the day, and I was completely honest with this person, I was like, as much as I support all of this, I still hate wearing a mask. And I think that that's one of the weirdest things, is being like in that place and being in a place that is so like all over the map with its like rules and regulations, is like people assume that when you wear a mask that you somehow are like gonna be rude to them about not wearing them. But then there's people that are like, when they see you not wearing one, they're like worried that you're gonna give them crap for wearing one. Like everybody's just afraid of each other with this shit out here.
Yeah, it's well, that's everywhere. That's the country, and that's because
Yeah.
of that it became political. It became politicized. There we go. I knew I'd get there. That maps meant something about
Yeah.
who you were politically
Yeah.
is the reason why it's such a weird sort of like sticking point for some people.
Yeah, so now I'm just kind of in that, and you'll probably get there eventually too, but now it's no longer even about thinking about the idea of like, oh, this disease. It's literally just thinking about like, oh, I don't want my neighbors to think I'm weird as the guy walking outside with a mask on still.
Well, I mean, I've felt that way anyway. Like when I was going into like stores back
Yeah.
during June of last year, where it felt like things were getting better that first time.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm going to wear a mask because I live with someone who's immune compromised. I don't want to risk it. Even though I'm vaccinated and all this other stuff, I don't want to be a carrier. And you'd get looks like, why are you wearing a mask? And then the thought process then was, is that look that that person giving me, oh, you must be wearing a mask because you're not smart enough to get vaccinated yet? Or it's somebody who's on that side of the thing being like, I can't believe you're a fucking sheep still wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Like,
It's just like,
and
so I
it's
think
just
that's
like-
gonna be the next phase of all of this for us, is we're gonna get past all of the written rules and restrictions, and now we just have to deal with all of the cultural bullshit that comes along with it. And if there's one thing America's great at, it's working out their cultural unwritten bullshit, right?
oh, yeah. Moving on. Yeah, so that's it. But we're there. We're doing stuff. And that's good because, like, I want to see Mobius if it actually comes out on April 1st, which just seems hilarious that the film's final release date is settled on as April 1st.
I mean,
when it
imagine
kind of
if
feels like the
imagine if
biggest
reveal,
joke.
right? Imagine if the reveal this whole time is that it's not even a real movie.
I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean,
if anybody was going to get involved in that, Jared Leto would be the one involved in
and
that, right?
Michael Keaton. Like, those are the two guys who are, like, the faces of that movie for some reason. And they're the two guys who would totally be like, yeah, let's do a fake movie. Let's just keep people engaged.
Man.
All right. So I decided to distract for a little with COVID talk, but we need to talk about a little game that released this week called Tunic.
Yeah, man. You were telling me that I should be making time to play it, and then you started talking about how much you didn't want to be playing it anymore.
Yes. And so I still recommend that you play it. But where
Okay.
And that's just the fact. I think that you, Sejohn Sarowick, would enjoy this game.
Okay.
And honestly, I think that anybody would enjoy this game up to a point, up to a level. And the problem is, it's a pretty enjoyable little game. It's not without its flaws, right? Like the combat is a little not as tight as it could be. And there's a parry element in the game that exists, but is A, unnecessary, and B, hyper unwieldy to actually use.
Okay.
And the only evidence I need to that is that they're like the achievements for this game, because it's an Xbox PC exclusive, does not include a parry achievement. So that to me says, because I figured that it did. Like River City Girls for some reason has a parry achievement, and I don't know why, because blocking in that game, it's kind of unnecessary. Yeah. I say as someone who speedran the game for a time, maybe it's necessary for you, and if it is necessary for you and it's actually making you a better player, kudos to you. But as someone who like regularly plays through the game with no upgrades and never has to block to get through it, I don't see the value of the block in that particular game.
Yeah, some of the larger games, like some of the speed throughs and things like that, where you see where they like take out guys in like one combo. I think that they use it a lot in that because it lets you continue the combo, if I'm remembering correctly, right? Like
there's no combos in River City Girls,
so then it's completely pointless.
Yeah.
But the big thing about control achievements is that they're normally there and given to you like literally after like tutorial moments of them. Mm-hmm. You know, so like I think of like I've just been playing Minish Cap and finished it up a while ago, but like there's all of this stuff in Minish Cap where like you learn moves, and if it were any game, any company but Nintendo, Capcom, right? Like what you would get is you would have achievements for every time you learned a move and pulled it off once. Every now and then there's like a thing that the developer loves so much that they turn it into a like parry 100 times to get this achievement. But that's rare. Usually it's like parry once and then you get like a thing for like learning to parry. Like thanks Achievo. But yeah, is it so? Which is it? Is it like you just mentioned that River City Girls has a parry achievement?
Yeah, the parry achievement, it's 10 times.
10 times.
So it's really like one of those ones where like you've shown us that you can do the parry.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. I mean, this is like Dale and I have speedrun getting all of the achievements or trophies in River City Girls. Mm-hmm. And we're around like 8 hours as the time that we do it. And that's just because there's a get to level 30.
Do they really not have a combo system in a beat 'em up?
I mean, there's a combo. But it's not like a combo system in something like Streets of Rage or something like that. Yeah. It's a one where like, you start off with a 3-hit combo, yeah. and then you can unlock a 4th and 5th hit. Like you buy moves in that game, yeah. And we've actually done the testing. Once you buy moves, it actually makes the AI harder because they're anticipating those moves. So by going through and not buying special moves or increases to your combo, you can actually go faster because the enemies are weaker. It's also a game where like, I mean, we've put a lot of time into River City Girls, Dale and I, and none of the stuff would actually work because I'm not the type. I enjoy speed running, but I don't want to like play a fight 700 times to make it perfect. Yeah, especially when like
I'm thinking more like Devil May Cry or like God of War and stuff like that, where like in order to like chain together larger combos, hurt more people faster, like adding in a parry in order to like or a bayonet is also really big on that one too. That's
even
where you
Streets of Rage, if you're somebody who's doing that things like grabs, they don't really have a block, but if you grab someone, it keeps your combo meter going. That's all about score though. So, like, there's combos in it, but there's no real combo system. And in fact, that's one of the things they're adding to River City Girls, too, is an actual combo counter. And that kind of bums me out because it feels like they're chasing the dragon of Streets of Rage 4 that released after River City Girls and was received much greater, in terms of appeal. But also...
It can bum you out, but that makes total sense to me.
Yeah, no. You don't need to bum me out. It's just like... It's not something that ever really worked. It's not something that was necessary in the first game. And that first game felt great. Like, River City Girls felt great. And it also felt like a River City game. So, like, to chase what was popular in Streets of Rage 4, while I understand why you would do it, it's one of those things where, like, but when do you stop being the type of game that you're supposed to be a sequel to? Especially when, like, River City Girls 0, even that game doesn't have a combo system.
So talk to me about Tunic.
Sorry. I don't know how we get
or a parry system. I'm sorry.
No, that's what happens. These are the games that I care about. So Tunic, I mean, it's basically a Legend of Zelda game at the end of the day. So as somebody who just played through Minish Cap, and you completed Minish Cap, right?
Yeah.
You could complete Tunic, and I think you would more than likely enjoy your time with it. The boss scavenger fight, which Zach, your brother, was Zach, your brother Zach, was talking about in the Discord with us as like that's as far as he got, and he
Yeah.
wonders if he's under leveled or anything like that for the fight. I can confirm for Zach right here that if he was at 5 attack, which I believe he said he was at 5 attack and 5 defense, that's the highest your attack and defense go to in the game
Okay.
in a
All
single
right.
playthrough. So it's really strange because for the first boss fight, well, it's the reason why I don't like Tunic, right? So I need to get to the reason why I don't like Tunic. And the reason why I don't like Tunic, the reason why I ended up getting so frustrated with this game is it has a really cool concept in it, which is in the world of the game, your
Yeah.
little Link character, who's a fox, and we've just been calling him Tunic in the house because, the little green guy in Zelda is Zelda, right?
Cute. Yeah. Yeah.
So Tunic, your little fox character, while he's exploring the world, he can find pages of the game's instruction manual. And then you go to the instruction manual and it's like that's what your map is. So it's like the old instruction manuals for games that came out in like the 80s and 90s. It's on par with that. And it's a really cool thing where like exploration finds you the pages and then you use the pages to better understand the world. It's cool. It's like a weird meta textual thing to it. And then by the time I got to the final boss and beat the final boss and rolled credits and was surprised that it was a credit roll. I did not know that I was going to be done with this game when I beat the character that I beat, who
Okay.
is the final boss. Credits roll, and then it says game over because I fought this boss, because you're not supposed to fight this boss. You can either retry or go into New Game Plus. And retry, what it tells you is how many pages of the instruction manual you're missing.
Okay.
So my first time through, I was missing 3 pages of the instruction manual. I ended up finding that 3rd page on my own, and everything was fine. And then I spent, I'm going to say 4 hours in the game looking for those last 2 pages of the instruction manual. And it got to a point where when I went to sleep at 2:30 a.m. that night after looking and being unable to find it, literally exploring every single part of the world and not being able to find them, that I looked it up. And even in that exploration, I had found some things. I mean, I sent you an image, right? Which is like a MS Paint drawing.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a gold obelisk in the game, right? Spoilers for Tunic if you're excited about Tunic. Once you get enough pages of the instruction manual, you learn of the Holy Cross, and the Holy Cross is the D-pad on your controller.
Nice.
And what it is there are little like etchings into the wall where if you trace what the etching is, you will either unlock a door or an item will appear and things like that. That has no bearing on being able to finish the game, though. It only has bearing on getting the true ending. And that feels superfluous to me. If that does that make sense? Do I sound like a crazy person by saying that?
I don't know, man. I mean, it sounds pretty par for the course with video games nowadays. The idea being that you can finish the game, but if you want to know the true ending, you can do a bunch of extra crap. Like that's like the baseline, right? Now, the fact that it doesn't present it well, bury it behind enough other bullshit to make you okay with it, like that is definitely something worth criticizing. But I think that the act of being able to finish the game without having to do this particular thing is pretty much video games nowadays. It's a very, I want to say cheap, but it's not always cheap. If it's done well, it's done well. But it's a cheap way to get people to
increase your
keep replaying.
replayability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to replay the game. Like, and that's something pretty, like I said, pretty normal nowadays.
So I guess what. All right. So eventually, in the instruction manual, I find out that there are secret souls, like lost souls, that are out in the world.
Oh,
And you get a spell that you can put in, and it will tell you when one's around. But that spell doesn't work as well as it's supposed to, because you put it in, and then 3 little spirits come out, and they're supposed to guide you towards it. and you have a checklist. Now, the biggest complaint that I'm hearing levied against Tunic right now, and it's why I sent to you the negative effect of Elden Ring on gamers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which was
yeah.
my big thesis before I got so pissed off with Tunic. And then it's just like, no, I'm just going to yell about Tunic. Is everybody that I saw playing this game believed that you would need to translate the Fox language that is in so much of the instruction manual. And that's just not the case.
No, I mean that feels like an Easter egg. Like if you
That,
can do it, cool, but not
but
necessary.
not necessary. But everybody is at this thing where, like, I am not interested in learning this language of the Fox, learning this Fox language. And it's like, well, that's good because you don't really have to. And even then, like, it's not about learning the Fox language. It's like there are specific puzzles that are extra puzzles where you learn what up, down, left, and right equal, and then you find like a sign that has it written out. So you, on your holy cross, you enter that sequence.
That has a very the I don't want to learn the Fox language criticism of a game, which is to be frank, ridiculous. Like it's a cool thing that this game is doing that I don't know. I can't think of another game that would have put you in a position besides like maybe like Fez. Kind
Fez
of
is the
also
game that
did
a
it.
lot of people have compared this one to. So.
Yeah, yeah, and like that idea of discovering like, that there are symbols, and then what those symbols mean is then the next step. Like that, like there's just a. But anyway, take that away, right? Like taking that away, it reeks of that kind of thing that happened when Book of Tales, I think was the name of it. No, what is the name of the one that came out where you play as it's kind of Prince of Persia-y and like Ori and the Blind Forest, but you play as a Book of Stories, I think, or something like
I
that
don't
is
know
the
the
name of
game,
it.
so sorry.
But anyway, so the game is coming out, and all of the characters in it are revealed to be anthropomorphic animals. Am I saying that right?
Anthropomorphic.
Anthropomorphic
Yeah.
animals. So like yeah, and that's also not new for video games. But for some reason, this particular game gets called out because everybody starts calling it the furry game. I think, and man, so many of these details are fuzzy to me now because it's been so long since this game came out. I think part of it was that the artist for the game might have even just been one person making the whole thing, had a history on like deviant art or something like that of like furry porn and things like that. So I think that lent itself to it, but like that means nothing in the grand scheme of things. Making a video game in which there are anthropomorphic animals as your main characters is not new, right? But people just derided that game, and it became one of those things where like you're not a real gamer conversation. If you play games that have animals in them, then you're not a real gamer. Kind of became like an ongoing theme in a lot of really dumb conversations on the internet. And so this feels like this is just part of that whole attitude, that real gamer nonsense of just like, oh, like I don't want to get in on this cute Fox language. This is gross. And like,
Yeah.
well, okay, fine.
Every
Just
time
don't play
that
the
they
game.
use like, oh, this game's so cute, I'm like, so what does that mean though? Like,
Yeah.
are you giving it shit for like having a? It looks like Zelda. It looks like Link's Awakening in
Hmm.
a lot of ways,
Yeah, which
and
is,
it's
I mean, like, let's be honest. There are a lot of people that have given various Zelda games shit over the years for their art
for their art
styles, like
style.
that.
Yeah.
They're,
So
yeah, yeah. I mean, but the idea that cute can somehow equate immediately to bad game is insane to me. Like saying that you're not into an art style and so you find it hard to play games like that. I totally get. I mean, that's
yeah,
why I
because
have
you
a
have to
hard reason
look
with like
at it. Yeah.
I mean, I have a hard time with things like Doom and Gears of War because everything's just like muddy and like and I just things are not visually pleasing to me all the time. Now, Doom has moments that are very different, but like look at Gears of War, especially 2 or 3. Like it's all like poop brown and gray,
Shades
like
of brown
everything.
shooters, man. Like
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah.
yeah, and so like I am totally on board with the idea that like I'm not into this kind of art, so this game is just not for me. But that's not that's no reason to like get online and talk about how like video games are now failing you as a entertainment because everything wants to be quote unquote cute and all that. It's just like get over it. Like yeah, sometimes people just want to play Animal Crossing, dude.
Yeah. It's I don't. And that's not like I wish the cuteness is not my issue. The game is visually very stimulating and it's a deep engaging world. It's just like when it gets to the point where every other page has been through exploration and then
Yeah.
the last 2 pages are solving puzzles in the instruction manual.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, this just feels like a way to artificially increase the length of your game.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not like a if there's not a clear growth from from exploration, which in and of itself is a puzzle, right? But
Yeah.
it's one that is much more topographical, right, in the ways in which you tackle it, right? Like if there's not a good evolution between that and then something to the written word, then yeah, it can be a real bummer. Or if you're not introduced to more written word puzzles earlier on, right? Because Breath of the Wild does a really good job with this, just to keep comparing it to Zelda games. I mean, the idea being that, yeah, there are definitely like the shrines where you're going to be doing a lot more like physical puzzles and things like that. But I think more of going after
The divine
the
beasts.
Deku nuts
Oh, okay.
and the various little puzzles that you have to do to collect those. And again, a thing that you don't have to collect all of. In fact, collecting all of them is ridiculous because at some point you top out. I think that like there's more than 1,000 of them now, and I think the top number that you can collect is 999. So like there's literally people that have collected more nuts than the game can even account for. And so like that idea being that like there are physical puzzles in the world where you move blocks around, or there are even sometimes things where you have to like read about like, oh, go to this particular place on the map, but you need to figure out you need to puzzle out where that is on the map, and then you go there, and there's a dude waiting for you with one of his poops. But like
That, or you find that place on the map, and then you need to figure out which exact time you need to be there.
what time you need to
Yeah.
be there, what angle of the sun needs to be at in order for you to like see him. Yeah, no, it's like there's some really ridiculous ones. Yeah, so like that, but that has a really nice scale of physical challenges to mental challenges, and there's an understanding at some point that you're going to have to tackle them in both ways, and again, you never feel like it feels from what you're explaining, it feels like Tunic really puts it in your face that this thing is there and you're just like, I need to solve it. Whereas like Breath of the Wild, it's never quite in your face that you should be doing more of this or less of this, because like that whole game just kind of lets the player kind of figure its own shit out. But where it sounds like what Tunic's also doing is, in addition to making these puzzles completely different from the rest of them, it's now thrown it in your face that, hey, you haven't done this.
Yeah, it's strange because it's right in your face that like when you go to reassign and you can't read it because it's in its own different language, or like when you get a stick and it says stick and then underneath it says it in the other language. So like, oh, by all accounts I should know what S, T, I, C, and K are now. And then when you get a sword, oh yeah, that's what S is. So it makes it feel like that's a thing that you need to do, but you actually don't need to do it. It's so in your face about that, but what you really need to do is find all the instruction manual pieces, and then, like, very much what I want from Tunic, what I honestly want, is a real live physical version of the manual. Because it's such a beautiful thing. Because then it even has, like, ballpoint pen notes taken all over. We go back to the memo page that we talked about last week when we were discussing Elden Ring, and this discussion of should I create my own quest log or not. Like, it's very much, once you unlock those memo pages, that's the solution to a lot of puzzles and things like that, which is interesting. You still need to locate where they are, and it has like a Star Tropics thing where if you stand in water for 60 seconds, it reveals an answer to a puzzle. It's got some cool little moments, and I will give them the credit for that. But the fact of the matter is, none of that is required to complete the game.
Well,
And
so then the question becomes, and this is a really interesting one that very few games bother to tackle. Fez is really kind of the other prime example of this, is what is considered the game and by who, right?
yeah, that's an
Because
interesting question.
like like Fez is the prime example of this, wherein like the idea of collecting the cubes and getting through the worlds is definitely what you're presented as the end goal. And there's a way to play that game where that's what you do, and you get to the end and boom, you've hit credits. And yeah, you did pick up that there was a little bit more going on, but as far as you know, like you were told to collect this stuff, you collected this stuff and you finished. It isn't really until you go out of your way to deep dive that you realize that that's 15% of that game, 20% of that game. There's so much more game, quote unquote, buried behind it. And if you talk to Phil Fish, I don't know if I must have talked about him at some point on this show, because one of my favorite documentaries of all time is the indie documentary that is about him, the guy that created Braid, and the guys that created Super Meat Boy. It's, and like Phil Fish is out of his fucking mind, for anybody that doesn't know. I like we drove him that way. The internet made him that way, just to be clear. But like at this point in his life, I think he has like completely lost it. And he openly considers the game of Fez to be that back half that you have to discover and find. He didn't make Fez with the intention of somebody getting from beginning to end in an hour and a half and like being done with it. Like the idea was he wanted it to be the kind of game where you had to keep notebooks, you had to go back, you had to reconsider puzzles, you had to walk away for a bit. And like he doesn't like that is the game to him. What he did is he put it behind a different game, essentially, is like the building of Fez. And like so hit my microphone.
That was a lovely noise. Thank
but
you.
Yeah, well, for a second I thought it was the thunder outside because it is raining.
I thought it was thunder. It was good.
But I realized it was just my desk vibrating. No, but I haven't touched Tunic yet. But from everything that you're saying, it feels like what they're really implying is like this is the real game. Yeah, you can run around as this cute fox here and blah blah blah, but the real game is this meta game. Not to spoil anything too much, but another. Oh well, no, we'll talk about that in a second. But just another example recently that really dove into this idea is Inscription. So like for anybody that was really interested in that one, like check out what Inscription really is, and it's not a card game. it is a card game, but it's not a card game. And so like so that's it's not an unusual concept to do this, and we just had Inscription being considered game of the year by a number of different people last year. So clearly there's a successful but not easy way to create that, right? Because we don't see it all the time. So maybe Tunic's just kind of falling on its face in that regard.
So the other thing about Tunic is that it's balls hard. Like I don't even know how to like say it. Like the best description I've heard for it is Fox Souls. Someone called it Fox Souls. Nice. And I understand why you would call it Fox Souls, because it's one of these games where when you die, if you go recover your spirit, I don't think it's souls, I think it's like your fallen spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, every death it's capped at only losing 20 gold, which is nice, right? So like you're not hyper punished, and maybe if you've gone down a path and you want to go somewhere else, you can go somewhere else. But the fights are not easy. It's not Zelda where one swing of the sword is going to kill everything, possibly two, maybe three if you're nasty. Like it's one of these games where like that boss scavenger fight that Zach had mentioned, I literally fought it for hours.
Yeah.
And it's because it was learning its patterns, learning the times when I could attack, learning how to take my items that I have to exploit the fight. Because you have like the magic orb, which is this game's version of the hook shot, and there's a time where that character is winding up where if you hit it with the magic orb, you stun them and you can get in like 5 hits. And then by doing that, it's how I ended up beating the boss. And it was cool. Like, it was a cool sort of... And that was the most rewarding part of the game, was that fight. That boss scavenger fight felt so much more rewarding than anything else in the game, including what came to be the final boss, which was, again, I needed to learn, like, the ways around it and how to fight it. But eventually it just came down to, all right, now I know it. And then I beat it, and it's like, well, game over. You got to go get these pages. But there's so much put into the combat and the way that you're supposed to approach all of these creatures that you're fighting.
Yeah, yeah.
That it feels, I don't know, it feels strange is the best way to put it.
I'm gonna have to get my hands on it, and I'm probably not gonna enjoy my experience much either. From what you're describing, I'm probably not gonna like it, but for other reasons.
So what I will also say is there are accessibility options. And you can turn on no fail mode, which makes your character invincible. And you can also turn off the stamina mode so that you can do all of the little movements for free.
That's pretty
So
wild.
if you want to like explore the world and just enjoy, the art is beautiful. Yeah. But it's one of those things, don't feel bad turning those on.
I mean, it does really make me feel, though, that... So what I was about to say, let me get these thoughts in order. So what I was about to say is it sounds like what it is it was a game that they have a larger concept for what they want to do, and that was really kind of the thing that all these developers they always have these thoughts in their head for years as they work through them, and nobody just wakes up and, well, the guys that make Mortal Kombat do, but that's a different story. But nobody just wakes up and just decides, like, I'm going to put this in the game today just on a whim, right? Like the idea being that That's the larger game, right? And it feels like maybe that particular dream of this game got kind of tainted over the last few years because of the success of things like a Dark Souls, like a Zelda, and blah 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 blah, whatever influences kind of come in. And so with the idea that you can turn all of that stuff off, it says to me, well, then that part of the game is optional. Like, not I don't mean that to be like a judgment call in any way. Just factually, you can optionally decide to just not play the game that way. The one part of the game that does not seem optional is this discovery of the pages and all that, right? So if that's the case, it really does feel like that is what they consider to be the game, and that the dressing of this game where you have to go through and maybe you die and you have to go and play a boss for 3 hours to figure out his patterns and all that. That's fun set dressing, but at the end of the day, that they could give or take that. They can't give or take this other part, right? So it really does feel like that is the game, is the focus on like the pages and the discovery and all that, and then the rest of the stuff is just the set dressing to entice you to get you there.
So I guess if that's the case, if that's really what it is, I wish that the Holy Cross had more of a bearing on the game.
Yeah.
If that's the most disappointing part of it, because there's also like 12 secret treasures that give you nothing for collecting them. It's just 12 secrets to find out in the world, in addition to the 20 lost souls you need to find, and you have to find half of those in order to get the last page, the 54th and 55th page of the instruction manual, which allows you to solve the puzzle of the door in the mountain that gives you the first and second page of the game. Like, you don't have the two ends of the instruction manual, and it's like, it's, if you read the instruction manual, it tells you very obviously how to draw out like that map to open up the mountain door, and I'm fine with that. It's just, I wish it had more of a bearing in the actual game.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you don't have to touch it till after you've rolled credits feels very strange to me. Or I wish, if it were something that's going to become such a large part of the experience, I wish that the first door that you open with it, like the place where you learn what the Holy Cross is, it shows you 3 doors, but you go to those doors when you open them up, and one of them's a sword, and it's like, oh, I already have one of these. It's not even like a stronger sword.
Yeah.
There's no real reward to solving what they want you to do.
Well, I think what we're seeing, man. I mean, like, I'm thinking about this with the rise of Inscription last year, and the way that it kind of rose through a lot of people's favorite games lists, even though it came out at the end of the year, like literally with like 2 months to spare, I think. But like the idea that meta, it's always kind of been there. The idea of using the meta game as the hook, as opposed to being buried for just the true believers, I guess, like is a really interesting way. As pop culture goes, like it seems like movies and television and stuff like that have been leaning into the idea of the meta for a while. Like, we've joked about how like meta humor and things like that have always been really big in our lifetime, specifically in the last 20 years. You look at a guy like Ryan Reynolds, who when watching Red Notice a couple of weeks ago, like, he breaks the fourth wall like 4 or 5 times in that movie. And we're just like, and it's not like it's a Marvel movie. He's not playing Deadpool. It's not like this is by all accounts supposed to be the quote unquote real world. But like, he straight up looks down the barrel of the camera at one point and makes a joke about something with The Rock, and you're just like, was that supposed to be like Ryan Reynolds saying that? Was that supposed to be the character saying that? Like, it is built into that type of entertainment, right? I wonder if what you're pointing to is kind of that idea of the metagame getting pushed to the forefront, and some people are doing it well, a la Inscription. Some people are maybe stumbling a little bit, a la what seems to be going on with Tunic, because it really does feel like yeah, like you're saying, if that is really the game that they wanted you to focus on and not this other game, the idea to turn stuff on and off is great, but also like they should be pushing that meta even further into the mainline game. And the fact that it's not, it makes it hard for you as a player to figure out what you're supposed to be focusing on and what you're supposed to be caring about. Because like, if people's initial reaction to finding out that there's a large metagame to this is, I don't want to deal with translating this language, you're failing. You don't have, even though they may be being assholes and jumping to quick opinions they shouldn't be jumping to, like, you are not doing a great job on your part either in introducing like, this is what this game is going to be, and like, we promise you it'll be worth it.
Yeah. Again, if it were more rewarding, if anytime,
Yeah.
like you open up the first vault that you can open up, right? And I'll call them vaults. I think it's a good term for it. You get a little charm that when you put it on, puts you into death mode, like one hit kill mode. And it's like, well, that's not really rewarding. The second one you open up and it's like, oh, it's a sword. And you're like, oh, cool, maybe a stronger sword. And, you know, you're not hyper powerful in this game. So
Yeah.
getting like a level 2 sword wouldn't completely break it. Like, the only thing that are one hit kills is the slime monsters. Everything else is multiple hits to kill.
Yeah.
So, like, give me a little bit stronger sword. And even if you just tell me it's a little bit stronger, I'll feel some sort of way. The big thing is, so it's constructed like the first Dark Souls, where you have to ring 2 bells, and then when you ring 2 bells, it opens up the sealed temple, and then it turns into Link to the Past, where you have to get the 3 the red, green, and blue keys to open up the thing. So then you do all that, and then you free the person that's in there, and when you approach them, they kill you. So then you're a ghost, and there's been a door that's locked, and it says ghosts only on the door. So you go there as that, and you're able to get to a different area of the game, and then you get a dash move when you complete all of that. And that, I mean, the back half of this game is really the problem of it, if we're just talking about what is there and what you see. Because rather than be a boss to get that dash, it's a boss rush, but also as a ghost, you lose everything that you've leveled up because you're just a ghost. Yeah. So you're back to basically level 1 Tunic, and you have to fight through like 6 bosses.
I have to, like, I really need to get my hands on this because I'm so interested in the idea of whether or not, like, I feel like kind of a lot of what you're saying is kind of the point. Like the front end game being kind of this frustrating, unsolvable puzzle, essentially, of like, why are they doing this? This doesn't feel like a reward. This feels terrible. This feels like punishment. This is more difficult than it needs to be. Meanwhile, the entire time, the idea being like, yeah, but that's not the game you're supposed to be playing anyway. It feels almost like it's on purpose. Again,
maybe I don't know. I don't feel that way.
Clearly not executed well. If you're not feeling that, if it's not making you feel like you're accomplishing things, I'm not saying they're doing it right. I just wonder if that's maybe the idea behind it and why they would structure it in that way.
Maybe. I mean, the draw to this game, and the reason why even I wanted to play it, is it looks like a Zelda game. It looks like a Zelda game where Link has been replaced by a fox. Like, that's the visual style of it. And it's isometric, which that's a whole other thing. Where like, oh yeah, there's a ladder hidden here. You can't see it because the camera doesn't move. And that's how most of every shortcut in the game works that way. And it's like, it gets a little tiring, that whole thing of it, that exploration of it. Yeah. And I don't know, like, I don't know. Like, I actually had to explore to find the first 54 pages of the book. So then for the last 2, like, I'm like, well, one of them's behind the mountain door, and the mountain door puzzle, I need page 55. So I'm sure it's somewhere in the world, which is why I spent 4 hours walking around. And I've beaten the game, I've done 2 New Game Pluses of the game. And it's not like when you go through New Game Plus, anything really changes. Like, there are some stronger enemies on the overworld, and that's it. It doesn't, I don't know, like the draw of it, and like, because it was all the people that I used to play Link to the Past randomized with were streaming it on Twitch. Like, people that I know from tournaments, everybody was playing Tunic. And then, like, watching it, a lot of, like, why don't I have a checkpoint? And that's why, like, I was mad at Elden Ring. Because as much as Elden Ring is this, like, game in the Dark Souls universe, it is hyper forgiving checkpoint-wise. So then playing a game like Tunic that is clearly taking in more of its cues from something like Dark Souls back in 2011. And the fact that you have to go a long way before you're going to get a checkpoint, but you can open shortcuts along the way. That's what it felt like. And the fact that, like, what led and beget Elden Ring being in this game being such a turnoff to people who had just played Elden Ring really made me nervous for what we're going to see as an outcome for what is desired in that type of game in the wake of Elden Ring. if that makes
Yeah,
sense. I don't.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
no. I mean, Elden Ring made a big splash. We'd be
yeah,
dumb to not acknowledge that, no matter what our feelings are on the game, or whether or not either one of us has maybe not even bothered to touch it. But I'd be dumb to just ignore it, right? So Elden Ring definitely made a splash, and because of that, that means there's going to be people that ape it in some way, and for good or for ill. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I I have gone so back and forth on this game as you've talked about it because on the one hand, it really sounds like a slog to play, but I want to be able to say that I have played it.
Yeah, I get that. And again, you know what it is? I'm you're gonna get tired of hearing this in 2022, but it's just the fact of the matter. Infernax did Tunic a disservice because Infernax is a game where when you beat the game, you find out that there's a good or evil sort of thing. Like you're making choices throughout the game, but you
Right.
don't really see what those choices do until that first time you roll credits and you either get as a reward the book of good or the book of evil.
Yeah.
Well, like Path of the Wretch or Path of the Martyr, I think are the first two that you get. And then you read those little instruction manuals, which is very similar to what Tunic is doing. You read through those instruction manuals, and that's when you find out, oh, there is a whole like level to this game where like I should try to be as good as I possibly can be, or as evil as I possibly can be, and then see where that goes. And then once you get the books for like righteousness or like or the demon path of the demon, those books let you know that, oh, if you get both of them, you'll get the path of the future where you get to defeat the ultimate evil in the future. And
Right.
each of those books is very similar to like the Tunic thing where you're getting pieces of this instruction manual and learning the deeper story, but but the game itself is engaging enough where you play through it, and then when you find out, they're like, oh my God, I want to go back and do it. Because those give you the information to make you realize, oh, this is a whole thing in the game I didn't know was there.
Yeah, see, it's that idea. There's that meta that you're not quite aware of the whole time, but you're kind of given hints because you are making those choices, and you know that, well, if I'm given a choice, the other end must mean something. Well, you assume, I guess
You
I
would
should say,
hope, right?
you would hope is yeah, the best way of putting it.
That you
But
have some sort of
right,
mass effect in the
and then
world.
you then you get to the end, and you're presented with your result, and it makes you want to go back and play. Right? It's the same reason why the Telltale games always give you your percentages at the end. Or actually, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I've been playing an adventure game lately called Jenny LeClue, and there's a little bit of this kind of stuff in that as well. But they let you check your stuff immediately in your notebook. You can pull up, and you chose to do this as opposed to do that. Are basically the way that it's stated. And so you can see, like, yeah, at this point we did choose to do this and do that, and it led to this specific stat. Like they're letting you see that in real time, which is really interesting. Yeah, I mean the metagame stuff, like I said, it's not like it's new to video games, but that idea of fronting it more and more often, and that kind of becoming the point of certain games is definitely something that I'd be interested in clocking, because we saw it kind of happen in the last 10, 15, 20 years with movies and TV. It's always been a thing in music, for music's been around for millennia, so like it's hard to talk about the time that music started to get meta, but musicians singing about musicians and working to make music is nothing new, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's just video games time. Like maybe this is just video games chance to start really kicking in and exploring that. Because the other one thing that I think of is there's a lot of stuff nowadays in the rise of like the visual novel stuff, but there's a real big move to gamify the hell out of them to the point where you're losing some of the robustness of them, but I don't think you're losing a lot of the emotional impact. There are some people that don't feel that way, but that idea being like, so there's a game that came out a couple of months ago called I think it's called Bad End Theater, and it's a game of choices, and so you are going to attend a show, quote unquote, but you also have control over the show, and what you get to do is there are four characters in the show. There's a knight, there's there's a damsel, there's a demon witch, and there's a low level demon. These four characters, and you're told a story, and then at some point in the story, from one of those characters' point of view, you get to see the story, and then at a certain point, you get to make choices for that character, and then depending on the choices that you make, you get a certain ending, and there is like a certain combination of choices with different characters, and then they allow you to like basically like set characters to make certain choices so that you can then go watch another person's story with those choices included, right? So the whole game is metagame. The whole thing is about trying to get this story told in just the right way so that you can get to the ending that you want. And of course, like the entire like last 10 minutes of it, everything it goes fucking crazy, and you learn that it's not really about this game, but about this larger thought concept in the world and humanity, blah blah blah. But you were able to explore exactly this concept in a gamified way through what you just did for the last 2 hours. But like the whole game is just meta. Like that is just the whole idea behind it. And there's just more and more and more of this stuff being created by indie developers, which means inevitably it's going to find its way into the hands of a AAA studio that's going to go crazy with it in some way. So like, you know, get ready for like Nathan Drake mugging down the camera once again, I guess. But like that idea that we're going to hit a point where there's going to be some larger and larger games that really get into this weirder and weirder stuff. And I love it, you know, like I miss the days of like back in the early 90s when you were like playing a video game and like they were like, call this number if you want this secret. And he's like, oh, okay. And you literally call the number and we're told like, yeah, you like press up, down, left, right on the D-pad and this will happen. And it's like, oh shit, it unlocked this whole new thing in the game. Like that, getting back to that kind of crazy shit, but like at a high level would be hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, the worst part about a lot of that meta stuff that we're now nostalgic for is a lot of it was copy protection, and we just didn't understand that
Oh
at the
yeah,
time.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But you know that's the ways in which you're going to see some of these larger companies really start to adopt it. It's not
Yeah.
going to be this fun stuff. So like get in while the getting's good, kids, because right now the indie developers that are using this metagame wave to tell some really interesting stories in games like Inscription and Bad End Theater and even Tunic, it sounds
Well, I
like
mean, the story in Tunic is pretty interesting.
yeah,
Like, even just like visually, like it starts out as you're exploring this happy world, and then you get to a point where you realize the darkness of the world and what is happening and how this world is run. And that's real cool. And that's all visual and that's very engaging. Like, I
hmm
called this world a deep and engaging world, and it is for what's going on. I just wish that I felt like the puzzle solving that is presented really post game, right? Because that's when you start to look at the manual and you're like, you're missing these pages.
yeah,
Felt like it was part of it. Felt like it wasn't just slapped onto the world.
yeah,
Or even as you're saying, if this is the thing that already existed, why did you slap on something so diametrically opposed in front of it?
yeah,
Why to open the sealed temple is it not finding out what the holy cross is and then using it to get in there? And then like you think of it as a thing that is part of the game. So when you have to go out and find these souls, I mean that one thing, that image that I sent you, right? You find a broken obelisk, and that's what they call it. It's more of a monolith to me, but whatever. Let's not mix words. And you have to find those 5 pieces of it, and then you have to reconstruct it. And there's no way to do it in the game. The only way to do it is to draw it out on your own. And
yeah.
then once you've done that and you solve the puzzle using your D-pad, your reward is a lost soul. And it's like, well, that doesn't really do anything for me. That's just like part of a larger thing, and it doesn't tell you where the lost souls you need to find us or anything like that. It's not even really written in the manual. There's just a list of those.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like it didn't do either of them to the full extent. It's like 50% of 2 ideas combined together to make a game.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I am very interested to check it out. And
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you'll
as you
love it. I mean,
mentioned,
solving mazes, you're a witness guy.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. But as you mentioned, like the idea of, well, I mean, there's another one where the entire game is meta game, right?
yeah.
And I don't think done well. I think the game that Jonathan Blow created over his meta game is better than his meta nonsense in that game. So there you go. But yeah, so funny enough, he's the one in Indie Game the movie
Yeah.
with Braid.
With Braid, yeah.
But yeah, so I do think that I do definitely need to check it out. And you, as you mentioned, like streamers have been playing it. It's been brought up like this idea that it is harkening back to like old Zeldas and stuff like that is definitely catching a lot of people's attention. So, maybe they'll have the opportunity to do a sequel, and maybe in that they can nail it more than that. I mean, we often talk about how the first game
Is a
usually
test, yeah.
is usually a test for concept, and then two is when they really perfect the ones that worked and eliminate the ones that didn't.
What I will say is I'm very happy that it's included in Game Pass, because the whole lead up to the release of the game was, this is not going to be a Game Pass game. This is going to be a game you need to pay for, and it looked like it was going to be in that $40 range. Now,
Yeah.
first of all, it's $30, so it's not a $40 game. So I think they understand the value of the game and the game that is there. But then when on release day, I mean, I had went to bed at 10 and woke up at midnight hoping to download and play it a little bit, and it wasn't there. And I woke up every 2 hours hoping that it would be ready, and it wasn't available to play until 2 p.m. when Xbox did an indie game like State of Play or Nintendo Direct. It just kind of came from nowhere. Like, nobody knew that ID4 game was happening.
Wow.
And that's where they announced that Tunic is available now on Game Pass. And even then, like, it wasn't available for an hour after their reveal at 1 p.m.
Yeah, they
So,
tried to make that a little bit more magical than it really was, I think.
Yeah.
I wonder, that either reeks of a guy with a bad idea and it just didn't pan out. And that's probably the answer, right? Like the easiest answer is usually it. But it almost feels like what they were doing was spending that morning in negotiations with these guys, trying to convince them to put that game on fucking Game Pass.
on some level, yeah. Because, I mean, well, the thing is, Finji Studio, the ones that created it, it was part of that big Microsoft buying a bunch of indie studios
Right,
to
right.
have, like, an indie studio thing. They're basically their response to the Switch store being this huge place for Steam games to wind up. Is like Microsoft's like, well, we can have our own indie developers.
Right.
And by all accounts, it's kind of worked for them. I
Yeah.
mean, something like Infernax being free on Game Pass, and the reason why I will play it is because it's free there. But now I would gladly pay for it somewhere else because it proved its value to me. Where,
Right.
like Tunic, I played it. I'm as soon as I got the last achievement last night, I was like ready to delete it and never think of it again. But I had to talk about it because it was one of these things that, like, I need to finish. I need to get this done. And that last achievement wasn't even a good achievement. It was to have 10 of... Here's the thing. If you play the game, you find these little fox faces, and they're piggy banks. They're piggy banks that are shaped like Tunic's face. So you smash them for money. Don't smash them. Because if you have 10 of them, that's an achievement. So what I had to do was play through the game 3 times to have enough of them, because I smashed them all in my first playthrough. It's just a fact. It's just a fact of how I approached the game, and then was like very disappointed that it was locked behind it. I mean, and this is a game where one of the achievements is there's a gun in the game, which I'm a big fan of, like, understanding that ranged weapons are an important part of games.
Yeah.
But, like,
yeah.
it doesn't need to be a bow. It can be a gun.
Yeah.
And you get the gun, and there's an achievement for getting the gun before you get the sword. And, like, that achievement has to be turn on frickin' no fail mode. Because you're going through places without the ability to hurt things.
Right. Right.
And that was fun. Like, figuring that out, that was some of the most fun that I had with the game. Figuring out a path where I don't get the sword.
Yeah. Devon creates his own damn meta. You don't tell him what's meta.
Well, I enjoy creating my own meta. That's the thing. Or I like it with Infernax, where, like, I just think that it's a basic Castlevania game. And then, oh, no. There are 8 books for you to collect to get the full story.
Right.
And then, like, and even to that, a lot of these lists of stuff still don't represent the final code that you unlock once you get all 8 books. Because they haven't gone that step further. I don't know. But that's the thing. So Tunic, it's out there. If you have Game Pass, give it a try. But understand that some assembly might be required to make it enjoyable for yourself.
Yeah, and play more indie games.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I'm not kidding. I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking about and even your problems that you're having with Tunic, I'm seeing it in more and more games now, the more and more that I think about it. And so just get ready because in 5 or 6 years, that's probably going to be the big wave in main games is this meta nonsense of like,
I hope
if you
so.
break the code, then you can get the other 30 achievements in this game
And
for
I'd be
Xbox.
okay with that. I'd be all right with it. I just want the game to communicate it better, or maybe make it feel like it's part of. I'm trying to think of a good example where you do something in a game. The Riddler trophies. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Arkham Asylum,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where the Riddler trophies are completely an optional thing, right? You
right,
don't need to get them, but you have to collect the first one in order to move the story forward,
right.
so that like you understand this is a thing that's out there. If you thought that was annoying, then you're probably not going to do it 79 more times.
But you've done it once. We know that you know how to do it, and it's been introduced to you. So you can't complain later when you're like, "Oh, I didn't even think I should be doing this."
Right. It's like that. If they had locked in, and the fact of the matter is the back half of the game, you unlock a dash ability and then you need to go to the 6 hero graves that you found while you were playing the first half of the game to regain your ability points, like everything that you've been leveling up to that point, so that in ghost mode you can have your attack stat and your defense stat and all of that. And then once you collect all 6, you regain your corporeal form. But even then, whether you defeat the final boss in ghost form or corporeal form, because I did both, you get the game over ending, which
Mm.
really supports your thing of like, the game for them is finding this manual. But then when you find the manual, spoilers for the very end of Tunic, sorry, Sejohn, you just give it to the final boss, and then there's peace between the two of you. Roll credits.
Wild.
Like,
Just wild.
so I did all of that to not get to fight a final boss. Cool. I don't.
Hey, man, what's the metagame tell you? Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I am very curious to see how this game does now and what this means going forward.
Yeah.
Because as much as like, yeah, Elden Ring being a huge release and it having some impact, like we cannot deny that there's also going to be some impact from all these little indie games that have been really firing off the last few months for sure.
And I'll be returning to Elden Ring. Like Tunic came out and I said I'm taking a hiatus from it. And then as soon as I do that, Elden Ring releases a patch, which I hope I can still play the game pre-patch without the patch stuff. I don't know if I'll be able to do that. But it's one of those situations where I'd like to play the game without the patch so that I can experience it the way it was. Because by a lot of accounts, what that patch did was make it more like the other open world games, where like NPCs, it tells you where they are on the map, and it made some fights easier. Like it nerfed a lot of bosses,
I
which
mean, I don't know, man. Your first week talking about that game, you were bitching about how the game kind of gave you no structure.
no, I mean, I don't, was that what I was upset about? I was
I
more
mean,
upset about the fact that there's so many checkpoints.
yeah.
Like and that's the thing, and that's where it feels like it might have this negative effect if Elden Ring is something that we pick up, where people are like expected to have like that many checkpoints in a Dark Souls game feels weird to me. It doesn't feel like a Dark Souls game.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, but we'll go from there. Mario Kart 8 dropped its DLC, and I fully intended to play it this weekend, but I was in the Tunic hole, so
I
I'm
checked it
sorry
out.
that we can't talk about it. But Sejohn checked it out. How is it, Sejohn?
It's really cool. It's a good sign for things to come. I'm laughing because the filler date for everything else is like 12/31 like 2023, which I cannot imagine that that's correct, but that's the filler date. So I bought the pack and it popped up and it was like, yeah, here's the new stuff, and then here's like 7 other packs that you won't get for 3 years, and I was like, no. But that's a future Season issue. But no, the 8 tracks that they dropped are really good. The majority of them, 7 out of the 8, are past tracks just updone for Mario Kart 8. And they're really well done. And they got one new track, and that one new track is a blast.
Is
It
that
is
Paris?
no.
Okay.
It is called Ninja Hideaway or Ninja Hideout or something like that, and it seems like it's really heavily influenced by Mario 3D World and Mario Galaxy. With in Mario Galaxy when you get to Bowser's whole thing,
That's
not Mario
Mario
Galaxy,
Odyssey. Yeah.
Mario Odyssey, sorry, Bowser's whole thing with the thatched roofs and stuff like that, tile roofs and over the thatched houses, I mean, and stuff like that. So that's it seems like it's heavily inspired by that, but there's also like a weird vibe to it from Origami King, from Paper Mario and the Origami King, because in Paper Mario there is this phenomenal portion. I think it's the second or third portion of the game where you go to a ninja theme park, like a ninja Disneyland essentially. And one of the attractions is like a ninja hideout, like that you can go through like a haunted house. And then you get graded on how many ninja you find hiding in the house as you go through the various rooms and solve the puzzles and stuff like that, right? And so in that in Paper Mario, in that ninja hideaway, there's a lot of moments where you realize like, oh, I can climb up into the rafters in this part, or I can go through this back wall instead of going through that door, and things like that, right? And this track seems like very influenced by that. There is so many different optional paths, not even like shortcuts, but just optional paths. It's fucking buck wild. It makes for a wild time. So for a new track, it's a hell of a good one. So it makes me really excited for the future future new tracks. And then the up-res older tracks are great. They're really.
I mean, that Paris track impressed the crap out of me. The
Yeah.
fact that it is the same basic level, but each lap is a different path through Paris
Right.
is so cool to me.
Yeah, and so more stuff like that is gonna be really cool. And the only downside, the only bummer is like I kind of thought that maybe they'd include one or two characters along the way, and maybe they will eventually. It just feels like we haven't really talked much about this, but it essentially feels like what they did is rather than make Mario Kart 9, they're just gonna just add what would essentially make enough
Make
for
a
9
9, yeah.
into 8, which I think is awesome, right? Like on the one hand, like it could get really dangerous if they keep doing this whole like pay us for additions to this, because then you start getting into the kind of the whole like Apex style model, or Rocket League style model, where like, yeah, you've got the main game, but if you want any of the new cool stuff, you got to keep giving us $20 every year for this game, and that feels weird to me. Like, I mean, on the one hand, they are doing the work, and that's awesome, but at some point, I would much rather just give them $60 at once for just a whole bunch of new stuff.
Yeah, so something that is polished and it
Right.
feels that way. Maybe there's something new to it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
so the track structure that they're gonna do is cool, and $25 to get it is like it feels really good. It's just as a fan of that game, I just was like, oh, I was kind of hoping for like a new driver or two, or a new vehicle or two, and maybe that stuff is going to be in there eventually, but it doesn't seem like it is yet.
yeah, I mean, everything they're talking about, it feels like it's just tracks. So if something like that does happen, I will be pleasantly surprised.
Maybe
But
like
the
the
other,
last one, maybe they'll just drop like Waluigi or something.
I think the big issue with that though is that the Mario Kart for mobile, I can't think of what that's called.
Oh yeah, Mario, like yeah,
Track or
Grand Tour
Turbo,
or something?
Grand Tour. Yeah, Tour is what Paris is considered. It's a tour course. So Mario Kart Grand Tour is making them money hand over fist.
Yeah.
And that is where you're getting a lot of the new characters. Like that's where Diddy Kong was introduced as a racer and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that stuff is going to stay there. And at least we're getting new tracks to Mario Kart 8. But also, we've seen with things like Mario Golf and I feel like Mario Tennis, where they're willing to add new characters just for free. So if they're going to do that to just the base game, and then the enticement is, oh, maybe I'll get the track pass to race these new characters in, I don't think the characters will be linked to the tracks. I think specifically this booster pass is just the tracks.
Yeah.
And based on the fact that I think it's going to be 6 overall, right? Because it's 6 of 8 tracks being dropped. I'd say about every 4 months we should expect to see them. Does that mathematically work out? I
That's
think it
something like
does,
that.
yeah. And that way you'll have 3 sets of tracks by like before Christmas. So maybe like you get your kid a Switch and you get a Mario Kart 8 and they have all this other new content.
Right.
Or like I don't know. I'm just looking at it from a commercial standpoint, but it's one of the things.
Well,
Like,
if they keep offering the booster pass, it's only going to feel more and more valuable with time
yeah,
because like if it's still $25 at the end of this year, somebody's spending $25 then and instantly getting three new Grand Prix, whereas me, who spent it now and only got one for right now, and now I have to wait until God knows when for the next one. Like in terms of like a personal value, mental
yeah.
value, like it's actually probably better to wait a little bit so that you get more of it. But I just wasn't going to wait because I
Well,
wanted to try doing.
it's 2 Grand Prix per drop, right? Or is it
Right,
only the
from what I
one?
can tell.
Yeah.
Nope, from what I
Okay.
can tell, it's 2 Grand Prix per drop. Yeah, if, from the menu structure, because they already have the menu there for the other stuff and all that too. You just hover over it and it says coming, 20,
Yeah.
2023 and or whatever. So like from what I can tell from the menu structure and stuff like that, it's going to be 2 Grand Prix per drop.
All right, cool. And so it's something I'm definitely going to do. It's just one of those things where, like, I needed to be done with Tunic. So I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, but I will have it and we can race in it so that maybe we can both share our opinions
Yeah.
next week on the Stay Report. But I have a hard out today, unfortunately. So is there anything else you want to make sure we talk about before we wrap this one, Sejohn?
I should just mention that I was finally able to see Spider-Man with
Hey!
with it coming out as the early digital release this month, this week literally. And yeah, so actually I also threw out my Batman plans because it came to Tuesday night and I was going to go out and see Batman and then realized that there was a digital release for Spider-Man that day and I picked the movie I hadn't seen over the movie I had, so sue me. But yeah, so I picked up Spider-Man and checked that out on Tuesday night.
And what did you think? No spoilers. We'll do a spoiler episode,
Yeah.
but once I bought it physical because I own the other two physical.
Oh, I'll probably also
Yeah.
end up buying a physical copy once that comes out too. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to see it, and like $20 for me to see it once and possibly show it to two or three people, like before the physical one comes out over the month. That $20 will pay for itself.
Oh yeah,
So
I think it'll cover it. But the reason is I got like the 4K that comes with the digital copy, so
yeah,
I would be double dipping there as
yeah,
much
yeah.
as I want to see it. But I want that 4K, especially just to finish out my shelf display of the
Right.
4K of the other two Tom Holland ones.
Yeah,
So April 12th is when that is coming. So that episode after that. So I'm trying to do quick math in my head. So the April 18th episode is where we will actually look at Spider-Man No Way Home.
yeah, because
With
then
like,
everybody will have the opportunity to see it
yeah,
and all that. Yeah.
um,
But yeah, no, fell in love all over again. Blah blah blah. Like the same stuff I've said with the other two Spider-Mans. Coolest thing in this one though is I did not really know how much of Jonathan Strange was going to be in this movie. Like and Doctor Strange and
do you mean Stephen Strange?
Stephen Strange.
Jonathan Strange is that kid who we lived with that one year. That was a weird year.
Oh God. No, Jonathan Strange and Miss Turner L is the novel. I think I was conflating with it. No, Victor Strange. No, Dennis
Steven.
Strange. Stephen, thank you. Yeah, but Doctor Strange in this one, the facets of his personality that they are able to kind of dive into here. That they have not yet been able to in his only movie, right? Like he's had definite roles in other Marvel movies as well, but this one felt like he was so much more than we've seen so far, and like some really cool, just larger story stuff going on with him, and possibly not being Sorcerer Supreme anymore, but also like smaller level stuff, like the relationship that he has with Peter and the ways in which he has humor and emotion in this one. It was very surprising. The only reason I'm throwing this out now is because when we talk about the final movie, we will definitely touch on him, but we'll focus much more on some of the more insane shit that happens in that movie.
Yeah.
But that was probably the biggest takeaway going forward for me right now is more than anything, like, yeah, it's great the multiverse is here and all that, and we definitely need to talk about it. But like, I'm actually so excited now for Doctor
Multiverse of
Strange.
Madness.
Yeah, Multiverse
Like
of
you need to
Madness.
understand, you were talking about things that you were excited about for that movie, and I'm like, a lot of that stuff's already kind of been confirmed as possible.
Yeah.
By what happened in the Spider-Man I know you haven't got to see yet. So I'm glad that we're finally on that page and we can maybe delve into it a little bit deeper. But like our big talk about that one is going to be April 18th, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
One other thing on that whole, sort of craziness about Spider-Man and everything you're saying. For a long time, the discussion was that Tom Holland was going to pick up the mantle and be the new Robert Downey Jr., but I think the way that Sony and their owning of that character, it's kind of fallen in the lap of Doctor Strange to be the new like glue for the universe. Am I crazy in feeling that way? Like,
well, so I think the implication had always been that Strange was going to kind of step in the new mentor role for sure for Peter.
Yeah.
Right. And then in terms of the idea that Peter was going to kind of be the leader going forward, I think that all went to shit when Sony pulled their nonsense.
Yeah.
I think Sony really, I mean, I said it then and I'll say it now. They've shot themselves in the foot. They went up against Disney when they had no reason or honestly right to at that time. Like it was just and so because of that, and Disney's reaction to it, for anybody that doesn't remember, they just pulled Tom Holland out of Comic-Con that year. And they were just like, fine, we don't need him. We'll figure something else out. Bye. And Sony like realized, shit, we completely misplayed our hand, and it took Tom Holland like calling everybody on the phone, like crying, being like, I want this to work, for them to even bother fixing it. Like I'm sure that's Disney had been like ready to pull the plug that day, and Sony didn't like completely screw themselves. And I think because of that, I think going forward, Disney has really leaned away from the idea of Spider-Man being the one to hold it together. I think we're going to see more going forward in terms of Captain Marvel, just because of all of the different Captain Marvel's characters that we've already kind of met kind of offhandedly,
yeah,
and the ways in which they're aiming for not just a Captain Marvel 2, but also a Marvels movie. I think that's really where we're going to see it go eventually. I think in the interim, though, you're not wrong. Like the idea that Doctor Strange is going to be, that Stephen Strange is going to be kind of the Tony Stark is apt.
Well, they were both good enough to play Sherlock Holmes, so we will see how things go. But that wraps up this episode of the Stay Report. If you're one of those people who really likes Papa Murphy's, Sejohn would love to hear from you, and he's on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
Oh, God, no. If you had your own opinions about Tunic, go ahead and reach out to Dev at Devon D. Decker.
I'd actually love to hear them, because so far, so many dissenting opinions about this game. I'd like to see if anybody liked it. Maybe even just up to a point. If it got to that point where you're like, yeah, I don't need to play anymore. Because that's where it got to me. And I'll be happy to purge it with plentiful amounts of Elden Ring. But we'll see where that happens. Until next time, Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so it's delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.